Welcome to the chat room. Nice to have your company once again. Fastest 28 minutes on television. We're going to cover a lot of territory today, and doing most of the chatting, Philip Jensen, the Dean of Sydney. Philip, nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you. I am talking slowly, so
No,
it's robotic, isn't it?
No, don't do it slowly.
Okay.
Fast is good. And what I have to say to you is, Merry Christmas. And if you say to me, you dill, it's not that time of the year, don't blame me. Blame Master Control. What are you doing up there? I mean, they can't always work out when to put these programs to air. Doesn't matter whether it is actually Christmas where you are at the moment or not. We're going to talk about why it matters and how we're meant to mark it. Does Christmas in fact matter for Christians? Because Easter matters more, and we spend a lot of time saying, well, you know, we really should be focusing on the death and resurrection of Jesus. Why the focus on the baby Jesus?
Well, you ask different questions there. Does Christmas matter? Yes, it does. But is Christmas focused on the baby? Should Christmas be focused on the baby Jesus? Well, that's a slightly different question again, isn't it?
Okay, let me ask you that one.
The baby Jesus question.
Okay.
Right? Well, it's important that Jesus is a baby. It is important that he is a real human being and that it's a historical particular. God became man once.
Yes.
Once only. In one person.
Never happened before, never happened since.
That's right, and that one person is Jesus, and he became human in him as a baby. In conception, he became human.
Because it changes the world when that's the case.
Yes.
I mean, I say to people, you need to understand this is an invaded planet.
Yeah.
The one who made it has invaded it. That makes a big difference to the world we live in.
It does make a big difference. It's also a great way of saying it, isn't it? But that he was a baby ceases to be important as quickly as he ceases to be a baby.
Right.
To hold Jesus as the baby is to miss the point. God didn't become a baby. God became a man. The way to become a man is to start as a baby.
Yes, yeah.
But the babyhood of Jesus is really unimportant.
Yeah. But the fact that he was born made all the rest of it possible, so we have to understand that.
Yes.
It plays
So he doesn't come as an invaded as a man already.
Yes. He's not beamed down by Scotty.
No.
No.
He comes into conception
Yes.
and goes through the normal 9 months to birth. So he comes
And is
into
born
life
and cries
as we
and
come
is
in.
fed and
Yes,
gets colic and all the other things.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it is important that he's a baby, but babyhood is not the important part.
Which means that marking Christmas, it's important that we somehow look beyond the baby, I guess.
Oh yes, at several levels. One is we look beyond the baby in terms of what we call the incarnation. That is, God becoming flesh, becoming human.
Incarnate comes from the same source that we get the word carnivore from. It means, incarnate means made meat.
Made meat.
He was made meat like us. We're made out of meat. Jesus was made that real.
Oh, carnivore. I thought you said carnival. I couldn't work that out at all. Carnivore.
Meat
yes.
eater.
Where does
I need
carnival
notes
come?
with these things,
Where
don't
does
I?
carnival come from then?
Carnival,
Yes, it's
a
not
celebration of
connected.
the flesh.
Celebrate of the
Yes,
flesh,
yeah,
is it?
Yes.
You just made that up, didn't you?
Yes, I did, but I was very convincing.
But it was very convincing. Okay. So he becomes flesh. Now, God becoming flesh is much more important than a baby is born.
Yes, right.
And even the subject of the virgin birth. See, I believe Mary was a virgin at the time of conception and at birth, that she and Joseph did not enter into normal sexual relationships until after the birth of Jesus. That's what the scriptures tell us in Luke's Gospel and in Matthew's Gospel. So
But why is that
problem.
important? Why is it important? Not just that it's true, but why is it important?
But that's the interesting thing about it, the New Testament. It's never discussed. Nothing is ever made of it.
Right.
It's never referred to again. There are little hints of questions about Jesus' birth in that they don't talk about his father, they talk about his mother, which is an odd way of talking about him, but it's never mentioned again. So when the Christians preach the gospel in Peter or Paul preach the gospel in all Acts, they never start off by saying, now, Jesus was born of a virgin. Indeed, John's gospel, Mark's gospel, don't even refer to it at all. It's only in Matthew and Luke. And it's no theological conclusion is drawn from it. Now, we might want to draw theological conclusions, and we may even be right, but the Bible doesn't. And so we need to be wary even to draw any conclusion. It's just a fact.
Okay. You've talked about what the Bible says about Christmas and why marking the arrival, the incarnation of God in human form is significantly important. But talk for a moment about Christmas in our culture. Because in our culture,
No, I want to go further.
Okay, that's all
Go
right.
further, go on the timing of it.
Okay.
That is, the incarnation is important because it continues forever.
He never loses the flesh he takes
He
on.
never loses the flesh he takes on.
Yes.
And so he becomes incarnate in order to die and rise again and ascend.
And permanently have flesh marked by
right.
nail marks in the hands.
That's right. Because God was creating the world for a man created in his image. Jesus is the man who rules the world because Jesus continues through his death and resurrection to be the man, and God gives to a man the judgment of the world, and Jesus is the man who judges the world.
And God showed this by raising that man from the dead.
Exactly. And so the incarnation is important for what God is going to do with it and with Jesus, and what Jesus is going to do in the future, not at the baby level.
Where the world is going and where our lives are going.
Where our lives are going, where the world is going, and where Jesus himself was going.
Okay.
And so the picture of the baby is really misses the point very profoundly. This is a
Right.
true saying and worthy of all men to be received. Christ Jesus came into the world to be a baby. Is not what the text says. Comes into the world to save sinners. And he doesn't save sinners by being a baby. He becomes a baby to save sinners. He doesn't save sinners by becoming a baby.
In other words, Christmas is like an acorn. There's a whole oak tree inside it if we just look for it.
Yes, and so to spend your time looking at the acorn,
Yeah.
I mean, if I was to say, look, here's a great picture of Kel and show a picture of you as a baby, I'm making fun of you.
Yes, and they'd also say, he was that beautiful, what's happened to him now? They'd say.
Is that too? But that's, what that is a picture of what you were.
Yes.
It's always a problem to me as to what with history, when they show pictures of historical characters, at what age
Yes.
do you want to be photographed?
A photograph of Dickens as a baby doesn't show you someone who wrote the books.
No, not really at all, does it?
No.
And yet it is the same person.
Yes.
And so photograph Jesus as a baby is really not showing you Jesus at all. I mean, he was for a moment of time that way in order to become what he really is and what he has really done.
This came up in a conversation I had. Someone said to me, where do we get Christmas wrong and how do we get it right? And I said, I think we get it wrong by treating it as an end, and it's actually a beginning.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
We treat it as
Yeah,
the end. It's
yeah,
the end
yeah.
of the year,
That's
and we're wrapping up things, and it's the way you celebrate the end of the year, and the new year's about to start, and everything's all finishing. It's not. It's just the start of something which is really enormous. And if you see it as a beginning, not an end, suddenly you're seeing it the right way round.
Yep. And that's why our culture likes it, because the end is really grisly and unpleasant, whereas the beginning is quite happy.
Cosy.
It's cozy.
Comfortable. Yes.
Comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, we can all love the Lord Jesus as long as he's a baby,
Right.
because he's then dependent upon us.
Yes, in fact, it's the other way around. Not only are we dependent upon him, he's going to pass judgment on us one day.
That's right.
It's either,
Yeah.
dear old friend, it's good to see you, or who are you? I've never met you.
A lot of the Christmas carols are sentimental nonsense. Some of them are really, really good. So Once in Royal David City has that lines about, then we will see him, not in this poor stable,
Yes.
but as he is, crowned in glory. That's where we'll see him.
And Isaac Watts put a lot of that stuff in Joy to the World. I mean, it's a king he's describing, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes, that's right. And Hark the Herald Angels is another great one like that. But the sentimental ones that go around the baby and just concerned with the baby and keep us at the baby, it's...
Okay. This is the opportunity for me to leap back at the point where I tried to
Yes.
derail you.
You did.
Yes.
Yes.
Now that you've talked about putting it in that biblical perspective, let's talk about the cultural perspective.
Yeah.
Because that's different, isn't it?
It is.
Our world gets Christmas wrong, but it still loves Christmas.
Oh, absolutely. It's wonderful.
So how are we meant as Christians, for example, as believers, to respond to what the world is doing with Christmas?
Well, most of us hate the materialism. I mean, Christians, I find, have a love-hate relationship with Christmas. The non-Christians have a love-love relationship, by and large. I mean, they criticise materialism, but they really like it. But Christians, we like it because Jesus is honoured, but we dislike it because he's so dishonoured.
And a lot of people who wouldn't come to church any other time will turn up and we get a chance at least to make contact, all that sort of thing
very important
happens.
and valuable. But most of us have a real cringe factor that I don't think the world understands. See, when people write Merry Xmas on their cards, I get the creep every time. You know, if you want to offend me, write Merry Xmas. Now, I know you can say Kai was the opening letter of Christos and all that kind of thing, but really it's not. And worse still is Season's Greetings.
Oh yes, which de-Christianises it completely.
Absolutely.
Or Happy Holidays, which is the American expression. Happy holidays.
Yes.
I'm not going on holidays, I'm working right through Christmas year. Withdraw your remark, kind sir.
That's right. And I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Well, bully for you. You know, I prefer the warmth.
Yes, yes.
I mean, there are so many silly sentimentalities, but the generic Season's Greetings is a nonsense thing. It's part of this secularist attempt to de-Christianise our culture. And our culture is a Christianised culture. And so we Christians live in it, enjoying its Christianised experience and expressions, but really feeling offended and assaulted by the way in which people are de-Christianising it all the time.
And they don't particularly want it to be Christian, or they've forgotten that it is. I mean, there were the kids walking through a shopping arcade, and there was a nativity scene that a shop had put in its shop window. And one kid said to the other, "Look at that, the churches are trying to horn in on Christmas now."
Yes. It's, I mean, part of it is conspiracy, part of it is just thoughtlessness.
Yep.
And you mustn't keep seeing conspiracy where it's not. I mean, the atheists by and large have given up worrying about Christmas. I noticed that our friend Mr. Dawkins is actually going carol singing this year, and he thinks Christmas is a good thing because it's an expression of the culture of our land.
It's just a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing. Now, in a sense, that shows how totally ineffective all our carol singing is. It is so totally harmless that an atheist who is anti-Christian
Can cheerfully sing all the carols.
sing,
Yes.
which shows the words are meaningless, the activity is harmless, and the gospel is not being persuaded. And I've got to admit, rarely have I ever met anyone who was converted at a Christmas service.
Right.
You know, it's just if you're a Christian, you hear the Christianity in the whole cultural expression.
If
You're not a
it just-
Christian, it just washes over.
Yeah.
You don't even hear what's being said. And so then you can jump from Jesus is God of God, light of light, to I saw Mummy kissing Santa Claus.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's the same thing.
Yes.
It's
all part of the same feeling. It's the same warm, soft bundle,
Yeah.
and there's no substance to it.
And now, we don't like the materialism of it. The non-Christians often don't like the materialism of it. The materialism of it is really important to keep Christmas in the calendar.
And we want it to stay. We want it to stay in the calendar.
To
don't
stay there, and the more shops are dependent upon it, the more it's stuck in the calendar, and no one can get away from it. But the non-Christian hatred of materialism has a certain hypocrisy about it, because that's their religion.
we? Yes. Yes.
When Christians get caught up in the same materialism, well, that has a hypocrisy about it, because that's not our religion. And so giving gifts in a way that expresses our true love for one another, rather than in terms of trading off the benefit of value of mine against the value of yours last year kind of business, we should be giving gifts differently as the character of our life. And we should be celebrating Christmas
Okay.
differently.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what it is Christians, believers, should do with Christmas. Firstly, in our families, in our homes, because
Yes.
that's where you've just started. So what do we do? I mean, when our kids were little, we didn't tell them about Santa Claus. There are some
Right.
people horrified by that, but it seems to have worked. We had a Christmas tree, we put the presents there, they knew Mum and Dad had done it. They spent a couple of weeks before Christmas poking them and feeling
Rattling
them
and shaking.
You know, can I work out what it is? And all that sort of... And they had a great time. They loved
Yes,
it. And
of
Christmas
course.
was a great experience for them. And when they said, "What's Santa Claus?" we said, "A game people play." It didn't seem to bother them.
No.
Is that worth doing?
Different Christians have different reactions to it, right? I'm with you on this, but I've got lots of Christian friends who would take quite different attitude. I mean, there are many fantasy games people play. There are many stories that we tell children about, Cinderella. I mean, it's got fantasy elements to
Yes,
it. I
yes.
wouldn't not tell it. I mean, I kind of laugh at those Christians who are so preciously anti anything fantasy, but they often quite happy to read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe without, because that's Christian fantasy.
Yes.
It's all right. I mean, if you're going to draw the line on fantasy, you draw the line on fantasy.
So fantasy's okay as long as we know it's fantasy.
As long as you know it's fantasy. And so most kids who are taught about Santa Claus, it does no long-term permanent harm to them. But for me and my household, I find Santa Claus personally deeply offensive, because more and more in our culture he takes the place of the Lord Jesus Christ.
What worries me too are those people who think it's important that kids believe in Santa Claus. I remember being on on commercial radio, and saying in passing on a talkback program, and of course Santa Claus is, why are we telling kids that Santa Claus exists when he doesn't? And I got this flood of complaints of, there might have been children listening.
Yes.
He might have shattered the lives of small children.
There might be children watching us right now.
Right, send your complaints to this television station, not me.
Yes, it's not important. It can't be important. I'm happy if people want to do that. That's what they want to do. I'm with you. We didn't celebrate Christmas in our family. We celebrated Jesus' birthday.
Right, okay.
And so we had a birthday party for Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, because that was when his birthday, which refocuses the thing. But we didn't talk about Christians either. We talked about Jesus people.
Yes.
Because in a culture like ours, where every second person is, in a sense, Christian, we wanted to help our children see who actually were Christians.
Yes.
And so, is that a Jesus person?
Yep.
Was a different question. It certainly, we raised our children to have different attitudes on these kinds of things, because I didn't want our family to be part of our culture in the destruction and the misrepresentation of Christmas to the culture, rather than I was worried about our children and what they would grow up thinking.
Right.
Because I could always tell them later,
Yeah.
like you say, it's a game that some people play. We're going to play this game.
Yeah.
How about we play it, but just as a game? You could do that.
There are some Christians who are quite happy talking to their kids about Santa Claus on the basis that, the kids can distinguish quite well between what is fantasy and what is real. So there's a range of opinion among Christians,
Yeah,
isn't
at
there?
a certain point they will. At a certain point they won't differentiate that, but that's the point at which, I've got a grandson who has an imaginary cat called Dragon, who, at certain ages, children's imagination is such that which is fact, which is fantasy, is a constant confusion of life.
It almost doesn't matter to them.
It doesn't matter.
Yes.
And so if it's in that world, it doesn't matter. So it's no big deal. But I looked through a website recently for Christmas cards, and in this publisher they had the religious section, which I thought was fascinating. You see, you've got a Christmas celebration,
Only a bit of it is
but
religious.
only a bit of it has religious.
So the idea that the whole of Christmas is a religious celebration has been lost.
Absolutely, with them they had. And then there were about 15 samples they gave, one of which had big fat Santa Claus. That's religious.
Why?
Well, if you believe religious means superstitious,
Oh, I see.
I suppose it's there.
Or if you sort of draw a long bow from St. Nicholas or something or other.
But it was the Coca-Cola Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
It wasn't St. Nicholas.
No. And I think, you see, Jesus is replaced. And when we have carols in the public park, on the Saturday night, thousands of people turn up to it. You move from jingle bells to Hark the Herald Angels Sings without any differentiation.
And there are some more modern pop songs in the middle and no one even notices.
No one even notices, and in fact, one of these things I went to, we finished up with the 1812 Overture. It was
the Siege of Moscow.
The Siege of Moscow was Christmas. Well, we were caught in winter, weren't they?
I don't even begin to understand that.
Well, it was really good because the army were there and they let off real cannons. It was a great thing. We just had, Jesus' birth.
So people do not understand. They haven't a clue.
No. Now, to what extent then are we going to be part of our culture, enjoying the season's festivities? And to what extent are we going to say, but I actually believe that God has, what was your phrase, invaded
Yes.
our world
It's Invasion Day.
at this point.
Yeah.
We're actually celebrating Invasion Day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Indigenous and Australians celebrating Australia Day. it's terribly difficult for them because Australia Day is the day when the white settlers came and invaded and took their land from them. And now we expect them to rejoice on Australia Day. Well, to what extent do they want to be part of modern Australia? Therefore they do. To what extent do they want to say, well, hang on, this is the blackest day in our history when we lost our land?
And we have a similar ambivalence. We want to celebrate the fact that God has invaded us, become a human being, and will one day judge us, which is pretty awesome stuff, but has also
saved us,
come to rescue us.
Yes.
But at the same time, our society is saying, yes, we think Christmas is wonderful, but it means something else.
Yes. And so how much then do I allow that something else to invade my life, family life, or church life? So should churches have Santa Clauses and reindeers out the front and sing jingle bells in their carol service? Well, I think at that point you've lost the plot, really, because that is not what we believe. The fact that it's out in the world and in the shopping centres, well, that's the world.
Can Christians use the opportunity of Christmas to say something really useful about what life is all about and who Jesus really is to the people around us?
Sure. And I think we need to at certain points, and we can in certain ways. One of the old ministers I work with, who's now gone on in glory, he used to say at these big occasions, just make a little ground.
Right.
And it is an occasion in which we can make a little ground. When people can come to church and find out it's not dull, it's not boring, it's actually interesting.
They're nice
it's pleasurable,
people. Yes.
It's nice people. I enjoyed it. I think I'll come back again.
Yes.
So we can do that. We can also put in their hands good literature.
Yep.
And help them to find out more about the Lord Jesus Christ. It's a time in which we can gather old people back into church in retirement villages and things like that who have very Christianised memories and whose old memories can be re-inflamed with the gospel teaching they had as children. It's times at which you can help people see, hang on, the next generation of children also need to be taught as we were. And so one of the problems is a generation is taught, they grow up, they move away from God, but then they have children. And the question comes again, how am I going to raise my children? What am I going to send them to Sunday school? Am I not going to? Am I going to give them the same experience as I had or not?
And whole generations drift further and further away.
That's right. And so Christmas is the kind of time which you can remind them and bring them back in. So there's a whole range of ways in which Christmas is a time we can make a little progress in our society. But I think something else is happening here. Some 10 years ago, Anzac Day, which had fallen out of favour because of the Vietnam War, about 10, 15 years ago, families, the grandchildren of the Second World War diggers, started to come to Anzac Day. And the parents of the baby boomer parents started to turn up and honour their fathers instead of dishonouring them about Anzac Day. And whereas the whole Anzac movement was in a sense going downhill, it's taken off a new life. Now, I think Christmas is taking off a new life again too. Through lots of things. There's a baby boom on in Sydney at the moment, but through lots of things. And as more people come to church on Christmas, so the continued media line that no one goes to church anymore
fails.
Yeah.
And
it's been turned around.
It's perhaps, I mean, you'd know more than I would on this, but perhaps it's a sudden recognition our culture has lost too much.
Yes, it's that kind of thing. And so it's only culture, like Mr. Dawkins, but at least people are saying, hang on, in our welcoming in of all kinds of cultures into our society was built on one culture. For better or for worse, that's the culture.
And there's something valuable there.
There is something valuable, and we need to retain that. And Christmas calls us back to that culture. Now, whether we can translate that, recalling people back to our culture, to calling them back to the Christianity that gave rise to it, well, that's the challenge.
William Temple, I think years ago, 1920, said that this is now a cut flower civilization. In other words, we want all the flowers, we don't want the soil it grew out of. and maybe Christmas is a time where we can say, well, look, this is what actually produced care for the individual. This is what actually produced the things we value most.
Yes, it does that for us. And whether we can convey that publicly, well, that's the trick we've got to do.
Okay, but without trying to make too much ground, we need somehow or other to try to get that message across at Christmas.
Yeah. And we can. And that's more than Jesus is the reason for the season.
Yeah, yeah.
Those kinds of cliches don't really work. We have to go much deeper than that.
And maybe we need to be a bit clever and creative. I mean, you and I have got some friends who run a publishing company called Matthias Media. They're on the web. Go to Google, you'll find them, who publish clever Christmas cards.
Yes.
And those sorts of things are useful.
Shocking Christmas cards.
Yeah. Well, kid born in shed saves world makes people stop and, hey, what does that mean?
Yeah, there's no snow, there's no tree, there's just a shed with a kind of desert country and kid born in shed saves world. Mind you, given the present Christmas cards around Australia, I think if you just have a nativity scene, it's shocking.
Yes.
Now, the kind of Christmas cards that have Santa Claus with a kind of circle and a line through, that degree of starkness may actually offend people more than it wins.
Yes.
On the other hand, it does challenge our culture.
It's a bombshell. And sometimes the bomb needs to go off.
Sometimes the bomb needs to go off. The collateral damage is something that you can't work out with a bomb.
Philip, thank you for that. We've talked about Christmas and covered a lot, as I promised we would, in 28 minutes. This is the time for you to actually start planning Christmas and saying, all right, it's going to be a useful opportunity. We'll think about it. What are we going to do with our Christmas this year?
It's really important because it's the easiest time of the year to invite people.
Right.
More people will come an invitation to a carol service than any other service. And so, but don't make it the last one. Don't make it, I'll invite my non-Christian friends so they'll hear the gospel and be converted. I'll invite my non-Christian friends because this is the easiest church service to get them to. And then I'll get them to come to another and another and another. It's
Christmas is a beginning, not an end.
That's the way you put it, and that's right.
That's
yes.
right, okay. Philip, thank you for that.
Pleasure, Kel.
Thank you for your company. We'll see you again next time on The Chat Room.